After all the jokes about UCLA attendance, UCLA athletics actually thinks they might leave the Rose Bowl? City of Pasadena says, not so fast.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson Yoxheimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel because football season, it's here. Just visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. And hey, just remember, bet your first $5, and if your first bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Well, we're talking about the UCLA Women's Basketball Pro Day. What did Corey Close have to say about her team and specific injuries? Then we'll dip into UCLA hating on Martin Jarmond. Yeah. And we'll lead with what might tie into the Martin Jarmond firing, possibility, if that's ever going to build into something. UCLA leaving the Rose Bowl? What? You're probably sitting there dismayed that the Dodgers lost Game 5 of the World Series. You're sitting there at home and you're like, man, this is a crappy day. All of a sudden, LA Times reports from Sam Farmer that UCLA is going to get sued by the city of Pasadena because they're considering leaving the Rose Bowl? What? So the Rose Bowl and city of Pasadena, they filed a suit against UCLA to make sure that the Bruins don't violate their lease agreement to stay at the Rose Bowl for their football team to 2044. That's according to Sam Farmer. The LA Times reported this on October 29th. Bit of a late night bombshell, and everybody's picking it up. So after all this, after all the talk about the attendance, UCLA averaging about 35,000 per game attendance this year. And everybody's like, it's all-time lows. Well, yes, UCLA had a few home games earlier this year where they were like the worst team in college football, getting blown out by Utah. Friday night game against New Mexico, and it was like, blow it up. And then you play Penn State, nobody had hope, and all of a sudden they win that game. So you get 3 games where UCLA kind of coming into that was a bit dismal. There's only been 1 game that UCLA played at home where the hype was real. But that just didn't take away from the fact that UCLA was actually considering having conversations to go play at SoFi Stadium. Yes, home of the Rams, home of the Chargers. They're like, why not add another blue and gold team to that stadium? It fits the vibe. Personally, having grown up going to the Rose Bowl, I don't see why you'd leave it. For anything other than a beautiful on-campus stadium, that's not going to happen. And here, let's think about it this way. You have the local Westwood residents that would not let UCLA build an on-campus stadium. You have the city of Pasadena that says, you ain't leaving the Rose Bowl for 20 years. It's not happening because your lease agreement goes through 2044. And here UCLA is sitting there trying to make the best of all the worlds. Like, all right, what if we just go to SoFi? And I don't even think SoFi is that good of a stadium. It's kind of overrated. It's hot. It's weird. It's loud. It's bright. And what's it going to fix the fact that, oh, it's a little closer? No, it's hard to get to. I don't get it. I don't get it. But the fact that UCLA is considering this, I don't think it's a bad thing to have talks and consider it. I personally don't like the fact that they would go to SoFi. But I obviously am not an LA NFL fan. I don't care about the Rams. I definitely don't care about the Chargers. So my bias comes through to that. It's a beautiful stadium, but I got over it after like 1 or 2 times. I also, like many UCLA fans, or in case for the students who go and try to, I have to drive an hour to go to the Rose Bowl if I want to go to a game. That doesn't bug me. You got to go through the 110, weave your way to the Rose Bowl, and you go to SoFi with worse parking prices, worse tailgating, just so fans might pack out SoFi and it can be loud and be like, UCLA. I mean, okay, I kind of get it, but it's interesting. Kind of back to what this complaint filed by the city of Pasadena, written by Sam Farmer. It says the complaint, this is from the LA Times article, filed in the LA County Superior Court is against UCLA and the UC Regents because it alleges that the university has unequivocally expressed its intent to abandon the Rose Bowl and relocate its football games to SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, which is a profound, quote, this is the quote, a profound betrayal of trust. All right. UCLA's lease goes through the end of June in 2044. So basically another 20 years practically. The Bruins are trying to say, hey, just because we've had conversations does not mean that it's actually a betrayal or a violation, or that this lawsuit should actually go through. So now it's kind of Pasadena versus UCLA, with the UC Regents, who are also mad that UCLA decided to go to the Big Ten and making them pay $10 million. UCLA hears everybody saying, look at your home games. We should make them closer to campus. Go put them in Inglewood. And then it's like, okay, let's try that. And everything seems to be going wrong at this moment. Who would have thought that the bye week would be so entertaining? And in the 24 and 25 seasons, we've had 2 bye weeks based on how the calendar works in college football. And you're like, okay, what could UCLA do now? They've already fired their coach. They've changed their coordinators. They've looked like the worst team in college football. They had a great comeback story, and then they lost by 50. You're like, what could possibly go wrong or make them a national spotlight when they've had the full circle, bad, good, and then humbled? Well, here it is that UCLA could potentially leave the Rose Bowl. I did a couple of years ago in my first year hosting this podcast, the options that it could be for UCLA, which is staying at the Rose Bowl, building the on-campus stadium, whether it was a transformation of Drake Stadium or something that they had to do on campus, or even going to SoFi. And I think for me, my conclusion will almost always be at this moment, go to the Rose Bowl, right? Just think of the olden times when UCLA had to go play at USC Stadium. How much that would be mocked now, I feel like, during social media. It's one thing for 2 professional teams to share the same field, Chargers, Rams, Giants, Jets, one time when it was Lakers and the Clippers before they built it. But it's important that now you got to be separate. And the college ranks, yes. Imagine back in the day when UCLA had to go play at USC at the Coliseum. And the Bruins got their own identity, packing out the Rose Bowl. All right? It's not like Miami plays down the street from their own campus in their home football games. No. And that's across the coast, across the country. And we're sitting here wondering, could UCLA actually do this? I know there's a lot of hate that people don't show up, but it's up to us to show up and support. It's up to UCLA to put the money into the program, get the right head coach, get the right players, that the fan base, that the alumni, the donors all support and want to root for, even if that's a changing name and a changing face, the changing leading of the guard every year in this day and age of free agency in college football. Okay, we'll get used to it. It kind of sucks, but we'll get used to it. But changing where the home games are, I mean, like, why are we focusing so much on that, whether this is old or new news? It's like, hey, go get the right head coach. Go get the right guy. Go get money and spread it for recruiting, NIL, rev share, marketing the program better. How about we take the damn tarps off the Rose Bowl? Which is funny that in this article that and the suit that Pasadena is alleging and talking about the devastation to the city of Pasadena, that the damage if UCLA violates this agreement, this is back to the Sam Farmer LA Times article, the harm cost to the city and the residents says, quote, could easily exceed $1 billion or more. Well, I mean, I don't know how much $1 billion is going to hurt when you have the tarps on the stadium. Take those things off. Stay at the Rose Bowl, for goodness sakes. But the fact that this is considered, I don't disagree that this out of the box thinking, like, all right, let's consider this. We've been told, let's consider this. But I think it takes away from the tradition. And at the moment, the focus should not be the stadium, because it will get packed if you put the right funding and the right focus into it. And the funny thing is, the lawsuit is only going to take away from the fact that the UC Regents just said UCLA can go spend more money on the football coach. This is where UCLA's handcuffed. And where the Athletic article a few weeks ago when UCLA fired DeShaun Foster said, UCLA is a little off. And then the Yahoo Sports article a few weeks later said, yeah, UCLA's just been handcuffing themselves. This is another example of that, where you're like, oh, we should be talking about who the next head coach should be, or basketball season, either the men's or the women's. Or, which was the bigger story, which we'll touch on in a moment, Ben Bolch talking about how the UCLA football players, former football players, were penning a letter to Julio Frank to fire Martin Jarmond. And instead, the lead is UCLA is having to battle the city of Pasadena in the Rose Bowl for potentially leaving. Whether they had conversations, whether this breaches or violates its agreement, I'm not that intelligent to tell you the legalese of it all. I think they should stay at the Rose Bowl. Hot take. I just think we need to show up, and UCLA has to prove that they are worth showing up for. I do. I talk about them all the time, every day. Every day, your daily podcast. Not always easy to talk about UCLA football when they're crushing my soul. But apparently, any team I cheer for football, whether it's my high school alma mater, whether it's UCLA football or the Raiders, they're just crushing me. So I don't get to watch any good football at this moment. So why should they demand, hey, let's change things and go to the SoFi? Okay, it's cool. I'm a bit over SoFi. That's my hot take. It's cool. It's unique. It's new. But like, students still have to travel to get to SoFi. Like, what's the difference? The Rose Bowl is college football's venue. Don't go to an NFL venue that stole away the eyesight and the money and the fun that used to bring SoCal Saturdays a lot of joy as the only football we would get between UCLA and that garbage program across town. Like, come on. It is nuts what's going on. Like, you would think this would be the most boring week for UCLA just before basketball season. Just when UCLA is coming after getting served some humble pie from Indiana, after rising to, as much as you can, Cinderella status. Clock hit midnight. And oh, by the way, Pasadena says, don't leave the Rose Bowl. I hope they don't. Maybe you disagree, but SoFi, kind of interesting there. We'll see how this affects things, if it does, going all the way through. Next, we'll talk about the Fire Martin Jarmond's campaign that everybody seems to be on, and we'll discuss that next on Locked On UCLA. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Because even if you missed the start of a game and you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from the score and to the next fourth quarter comeback. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps the game and every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, new customers with FanDuel can get $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go ahead to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, cruising on, what could have been the lead of today's show is instead, I guess, pushed to the back burner. I'm not even sure if it's a back burner. It's something we're going to talk about. UCLA and the growing divide over the fact that Martin Jarmond still has the athletic director position. All right, the growing divide. Because earlier on that October 29th day, there's Ben Bolch, UCLA beat writer, who wrote a piece about that 64 UCLA players, football players, penned something of like, hey, voices of displeasure, if you will, to Julio Frank, the new chancellor, saying, hey, how about we get rid of Martin Jarmond? We're tired of this nonsense, all right? We're tired of it. That was kind of the basis of, hey, this is what the quote is in the Ben Bolch article, reestablish the university's commitments to excellence both on and off the field, all right? And the growing disgust with Martin has been seen at the last few UCLA football games. Banners literally flying over the Rose Bowl that one time at UCLA practice used to say Chip Kelly, fire Chip Kelly, which were directed right at Martin Jarmond, and now have been flipped to say fire Martin Jarmond. All right. And according to this LA Times article, it's from Bob Toledo era players to Chip Kelly era players. All right. So that's very interesting. Very interesting that you have that many players who have come out in support of getting rid of Martin Jarmond. All right. Football specifically, right as UCLA has just gotten in their own mess of potentially leaving the Rose Bowl for SoFi. I don't blame the idea for UCLA exploring it. It has to be explored. But the fact that now the city of Pasadena is trying to sue them, get in a suit against UCLA and the UC Regents, they obviously did something wrong, potentially, allegedly, that it's even becoming public news if UCLA is going to, quote unquote, violate its agreement with the Rose Bowl in the city of Pasadena, which could just add to this long list of misguided things that Martin Jarmond has done, either allegedly, whether it's the UCLA debacle of potentially leaving the Rose Bowl, or you look at UCLA's inability to get rid of Chip Kelly. The debacle that was the 15 games of DeShaun Foster. And I remember talking to some UCLA faithful people that were like, would you rather get rid of DeShaun Foster or Martin Jarmond? And the answer was Martin Jarmond over DeShaun Foster. And DeShaun Foster had the shortest tenure of any UCLA football coach in its program's history for a permanent head coach. And people would still probably rather get rid of Martin Jarmond first to get better leadership, better funding, better leadership. And then you're like, wait, what has UCLA done? Of the new coaches UCLA hired, it was Marguerite Elzasa for the women's soccer team that won a championship. And then the other teams are like, okay, they're doing all right. The football team has been in shambles, all right? And it seems like the other programs have almost succeeded in spite of all this. And there's been other things, especially at the end of this LA Times article by Ben Bolch that talks about the leaked donor data, lowered expectations for success, and then just the fact that there's been continued deficits in the athletic department. And let's not forget, there are tarps all over the football stadium, including that 2022 game when UCLA played USC, where it would have sold out the Rose Bowl, one of the most exciting UCLA SC games in recent memory. When UCLA had a good year under Chip Kelly, first year for Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, and the Bruins like, nah, let's put up a tarp and not sell out this bad boy. That is what UCLA's become. Tarp, you're trying to just get in your own way. The leaked donor data from Martin Jarmond, everything. And then what? The potential flirtation with him and the USC job is kind of an eyesore. Obviously, Jen Cohen got that job, but I mean, what's the relationship like behind the scenes with the head coaches of the various programs, right? If you're looking at where once proud programs like a UCLA softball program, for example, you're seeing Texas Tech, some might say stupidly so, but for them, they got super success paying so much money for Nigel Kennedy. And they went from never heard of to joke of a program to the Women's College World Series and within a game or two of getting to a championship in a sport they never competed in. And UCLA has somewhat faded. That's not necessarily a Kelly Inouye Perez problem. That's how do we game plan for this new age of college sports, whether it is in softball, it is in all these other sports. It took UCLA a couple years in men's basketball to figure out, hey, why don't we go support some of the better players in the transfer portal with NIL and now rev share, and they finally got it down to the dent. 2 years too late when the Bruins could have been ahead of the pack in that regard. Or think about a year too late, 2 years too late in some eyes to get rid of Chip Kelly, and now UCLA is stuck in a crowded field with as many big-time jobs open in college football. And I think I was seeing Joel Klatt talk about how much coaching talent is there out there that's proven and ready to go. They're trying to get Nick Saban, not UCLA, but some of those other big jobs are trying to get Nick Saban and Urban Meyer out of TV right now. That's how thin there is of coaching spots. Matt Rule extended. Kurt Signetti record-setting extensions. So UCLA's in a spot where they're challenging and fighting for top-tier potential coaching talent with as many guys and as many teams as possible. Just because they fired DeShaun first doesn't mean that UCLA is doing the right things. And the fact that Martin Jarmond, from what I've heard, was having Sunday meetings with the coaching staff after the coaching switch. Like, who does that as an AD? And you're like, okay. And it's been frustrating. And you're like, wow, these cries for his job are getting louder. They're flying. Where in the country do you see programs having a banner flown over their football games to fire the athletic director? You know how absolutely frustrated you have to be with this guy to do that, for people to pay their own money and be like, yeah, we're going to fly a banner, fire this guy. And unfortunately, according to Ben Bolch, it says that Julio Frank gave a statement, UCLA supporting Martin Jarmond. Supporting Martin Jarmond. So right when we thought UCLA has the guy to potentially make the changes, right? Make the changes. In between the chancellors, you had the interim who came in and approved an extension of Jarmond's job before Frank got there. So he's got stability, and UCLA would probably have to pay the majority of his contract if he's going to be given out for a $7 million buyout. Like, that's crazy. absolutely crazy that he would be given the full amount of his contract through 2029, $7.1 million, extended. And that's before people were truly flying the banners. Nobody was happy with Martin's shortcomings before he was extended. And the fact that he's got a big time contract extension in between the chancellors is another thing where we're like, that just seems a little shady and misguided for that to happen when UCLA already knew who their incoming chancellor was. That's what's going on behind the scenes right now with UCLA, and the fact that they're now getting yelled at by the city of Pasadena for potentially leaving the Rose Bowl. Not a horrible premise to think about it, but they went about it in such a way that the city of Pasadena knew. They're like, no, we're not going to let that happen. That just showcases where you're not thinking ahead of the curve. You're just like, oh, let's think about this. And now everything you do, you're just in trouble. Everything you do is going to be criticized. And that's sometimes what you have to deal with as a leader, as the front-facing person of UCLA athletics. And it just continues to turn into a circus. In one day, you have two things, bam, bam, bam. Just like little PR news hits in negative fashion towards UCLA. Like, oh man, yeah, former football players. 64 of which trying to get rid of Martin Jarmond. And for Julio Frank, his hands are kind of tied. He's like, why are we going to pay this dude $7.1 million to not be the athletic director? That's more than some football coaches are getting paid to not coach. And UCLA might have to do that with an AD, as they have a coaching search committee. It's like, what are we doing here? We don't want the guy who just hired this last guy, couldn't fire the previous guy, to be in charge of the biggest decision for UC athletics in the future, which is the football coaching search and the continuing leading and rev share of everything when it comes to basketball. Because men's and women's, they're going to need that support beyond just this year. All right? They're going to need that. Frustrating as it is. Next, we will talk about UCLA women's hoops. Some top-tier talent in the top 25 players, top 20 players in the country. And what does Corey Close say about some key injuries? We'll talk about that next on Locked on UCLA. Mazda crafts cars for those who simply do more than move. Mazda delivers the confidence with every ride, and with more IIHS top safety picks awards than anybody else, they've got the footwork, the breath work. They're like athletes. They sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. You can make those everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And like our players, they'll sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Cruising things on here with Locked On UCLA. We're flipping the gear. More positive, more firecracker. We're talking UCLA women's hoops, because this is a UCLA team that comes in as one of the top teams in the country. All right, clear-cut top 2, top 3 title contender. And I was looking at ESPN's list for top 25 players, for expected contenders, and here's something that kind of caught my eye. The UCLA women's team is clearly expected to run away with the Big Ten. With Juju out, there is not a real contender in the Big Ten Conference to challenge UCLA. There'll be tough games, tough road games for sure. There might be an upset potential or two, but the Bruins went out specifically in this non-conference year to challenge themselves by playing everybody that's not named UConn. Honestly, they're playing just about everybody who is viewed as a contender in the other conferences other than UConn. And hopefully they'll get that South Carolina game on Thanksgiving Day. But other than that, UCLA is viewed as a prime contender. The problem with that contention status is looking at these ESPN championship predictions. UCLA expected to be in the Final Four unanimously. The problem is it's a unanimous selection for UConn to repeat. UConn to repeat. So let's kind of go over the top 25 players in women's basketball, also powered with ESPN. Number 1 is Sarah Strong. Number 2, Lauren Betts. And remember, Sarah Strong was the key to UConn going from good to, oh, they're great, elites, and bringing Paige Beckers to the promised land before she went to the WNBA draft and leaving as a national champion. All right. So you have Sarah Strong is the number one player in women's college basketball. I like to lean Lauren Betts, but that's the case right now. Then you keep going down this list, and UCLA has the number 14 player in Gianna Kneepkens. For UConn, they give a lot of love to Fudd, who is a 5'11 senior that averaged 13 points per game and about an assist per game. And she is one of the reasons why UConn's supposed to be good alongside Sarah Strong. All right. And then you mix in Sarah Williams, and you're like, man, this team is supposed to be very, very good. But UCLA also has Kiki Rice, who is a top 17 product in this list. Sarah Williams is ranked 18. So between the top 18 players in the country, top 20 players in the country, UCLA, UConn, each have 3 of those types of players. 3. And that's not to forget Charlize Ledger-Walker, who has just been a year away from injury. All right. That is something to look at. While UCLA, they recently hosted their pro day. Corey Close talked with everybody and was saying, all right, yeah, we're happy to be the first program on the women's side to have a pro day. Like, let's do that. We have 7 seniors, which puts a lot of pressure on UCLA this year to win a title. Sometimes you get these classes, and more so now with how UCLA's built this squad, players that have been there 2, 3, 4 years in some cases, mixed in with a couple of transfers who have been there for a year or two, and Gianna Kneepkens, the free agent transfer portal steal, some addition by subtraction. And the Bruins are supposed to be like basically the number 2, number 3 team in the country. South Carolina is getting a lot of love as the number 2. I don't see it, and I hope the Bruins get to prove that on Thanksgiving Day. And I would love to see UCLA get that rematch against UConn, just like they did against LSU this year in the tournament. I hope they get it against UConn in the national championship game. All right, that's what I hope. That's what I would love to see. But things to look at, this is what Corey Close had to say, asked about Sienna Betts' injury. She is not going to be there for the opener, but it is not a season-ending type injury, considering she has a boot on her foot, and I hope it's not the case. And it looks like it's not a season-ending injury. The Bruins, with a pro day, a lot of seniors, a lot of players who have been there for a while. Corey Close came out and said she wasn't too pleased with their team's defensive intensity and intensity towards attacking the glass, which is interesting. You have a team that has sometimes had their defense cleaned up by the lurking prowess that is Lauren Betts in the paint to clean things up and her rebounding prowess. But apparently that's what they've been lacking, because UCLA can score. They've always been able to score, but now they have shooters and scorers from all 3 levels. You've got the dominant post presence in Lauren Betts. You've got shooters like Tamia Gardner, Gabriela Jaquez, who can come in and hit some threes, score in various ways, get some rebounds. And then you bring in Gianna Kneepkens and Charlize Ledger-Walker, who are going to expand what UCLA can do on the wing. And then there's Kiki Rice, who is hopefully a little bit healthier compared to her preseason shoulder injury a year ago, and it can grow while not having as much pressure as she did last year as the true primary ball handler, the only one UCLA had. And now UCLA's got multiple players who can bring up the basketball, who can score it, especially from downtown. And the one concern is that Corey Close, maybe even pulling a page out of Mick Cronin's book, saying, I got to call my team as best I can to say the defensive intensity is not there. The willingness to attack the glass is not there. So, okay, you got to have that as your championship makeup. Even Close came out and said, yeah, the top 5 or 6 teams in the last championship runs have all been elite defensively, number 1 in defense. And sometimes we see UCLA struggling a little bit defensively. They certainly turn it over a lot. So sometimes they're hurt defensively because the Bruins just turn the basketball over a lot. So if they take care of their own rock when they have the ball and become a better rebounding team outside of just Lauren Betts, if they can attack the glass on the offensive side, and if they're apparently a better defensive team than Corey Close, as is the case when you have a top 3 team, always challenging her roster, challenging her championship level team to develop into that. You're not going to be that day one. You're not going to be that on Halloween. You're not going to be that day one, November 3rd, when you're playing your opener. It might hopefully look like that when you play in Oklahoma and Texas and hopefully in South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. But to go get that, you've got to earn that now. And maybe UCLA can outscore teams, but when teams get into a low-scoring battle, defensive grinded-out battle, like they would in recent years sometimes against USC, sometimes UCLA wouldn't come out in the right end of things. And you saw it until the Big Ten championship game when the Bruins proved their championship medal when they took out Juju Watkins and USC in the Big Ten tournament championship game. 3 games in 3 days, and had the heart, the grit, and the tenacity to go do it. And when things weren't going right against LSU, they pulled it out. They did the same thing. But against UConn, the Final Four, embarrassed on a national stage. Embarrassed. I think that's what she's trying to bring into the returners and also tell the new players that, hey, we've got a lot of talent. When it comes to the Naismith top players of the year, top player of the year, National Women's Basketball Player of the Year, preseason watch list, UCLA's got like 4 players on that list. In the top 25, UCLA's got 3 of the top 20 players in the country. But what's the difference between that and UConn, South Carolina, Texas, other teams that we're not just mentioning right now? It's the championship DNA. And UConn, apparently for years under Gino, has instilled it, and they have it coming into this year. The Bruins just haven't earned it and learned it yet. And when they do, they might be one of the best teams we've ever seen in the women's college game. They have one of the best, most talented rosters ever assembled for UCLA in its history. And to do so, they got to go out and win a national championship in the last year when they have 7 seniors, a lot of older players, before they hand the baton off to the youngsters and the transfer portal in the next offseason. But for now, UCLA apparently has a lot to learn, a lot of talented players, before they take on one of the most daunting non-conference schedules you can play. Mid-major teams all in the tournament, and the top-tier teams in power conferences in the top 25. A lot of those in the top 10. And that's why you should stick here with Locked On UCLA. Like, comment, subscribe, download, and we'll talk more about this women's team, the men's team, as they get closer to opening night. And we'll talk UCLA football, whatever this saga looks like in the Rose Bowl versus UCLA, City of Pasadena versus UC Regents battle. And will they ever fire Martin Jarmond? I don't know. A lot of that and more on Locked On UCLA. So stick here, stay here, and we'll talk about it. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.